Hi guys, today we're going to talk about canning and all of the essentials that you need to start canning. This video is a collaboration hosted by Serenity Farmstead. Thank you guys so much for hosting. In the description below, you'll find other links to other homesteads sharing some of their favorite skills, so make sure to check those out. So one of the first things I want to talk about is a pressure canner, and a pressure canner is necessary if you're going to can low acid foods or foods that you're not going to pickle. I actually bought this pressure canner without this little gauge here, but I bought the gauge separately on Amazon. I'll make sure to link everything down below, but I like this gauge because it tells me when I get to about 10 pounds of pressure, and I can control how much pressure is in the canner so that I'm not overcooking things, because we don't want stuff to turn to mush. And make sure that when you buy a canner that it comes with this rack that goes on the bottom. This is very important. Sometimes if you buy them in stores, those might be missing. If you don't want to get into pressure canning just yet, you could start with just a regular stock pot, even a regular pot that you have in your house now, and just use shallower jars. I have several stock pots. This is my medium-sized one. I think it's a 16 quart, but I actually have one that's even larger than this. And sometimes these don't come with a rack, so you could purchase these little silicone mats that go inside. And it's important to have something between your jars and the bottom of your pot, because once this comes to a boil, those jars are going to start rattling and you don't want them bouncing around in your pot. So you want there to be some kind of flow between your jars and the bottom of your pot. So that's what these little mats are for. This one's kind of a pain because it tends to float up to, it folds up on itself in the water, so I have to put a jar on top of it to keep it flat. There's probably better ones out there, but since I already have it, that's what I'm using. Next up is something that is completely necessary for canning it, especially when you're canning savory things, and that is canning and pickling salt. I just use the Morton brand, but this is really important because if you used table salt or iodized salt, you're going to get a really cloudy, nasty solution in your jars, and you want that brine to stay nice and clear. My absolute must-have are these canning funnels. This just keeps your area tidy and clean, and it keeps you from spilling your brine or fruit onto the side of your jar. So these are really a must-have for canners, I think, but you could do without if you are super skilled at pouring stuff into jars. Next up are these really skinny spatulas. You're going to need these especially when canning fruit, because it's going to help you get rid of the air bubbles that might be stuck between your fruit or in the center of your jar. Tongs are important because you may have to move hot stuff around, like the lids. There's also some magnetic wands that you can use to remove lids from boiling water. And then these are your jar lifters. Definitely have to have these, because how else are you going to get your jars in and out of your pots? These are a must-have. You cannot can without these guys. So definitely get a set or two of these. I also like to keep some canning lids, some extra canning lids around, and some rings. I use both wide mouth and regular mouth jars. And something I want to touch on about wide mouth and regular mouth jars is there is a difference, and you do want to use them for specific things. The regular mouth jars have this little curve, and this is really helpful when you're canning like stoned fruit or whole fruits or tomatoes that you want to stay lower in the jar and not float to the top. The wide mouth jars are great because your whole hand can fit in there, so you can move stuff around. But if you have anything that floats, like fruit, stuff that you haven't blanched first, they might float to the top on the regular mouth jars. So the ones with the curve just helps to keep the fruit down. I also like to have these storage lids handy, because when I do open things up and I don't eat everything in the jar, I like to be able to store them away in the refrigerator. So those are really great. Again, I'll link all of this stuff in my Amazon store down below, so you guys could find everything that I use. So I love to can, and those are just my must-haves for canning. You could probably go without using some of those things, but for me, those are the things I use all the time. One thing that I would like to add that you need to have is a timer. I just use the timer on my stove, but you may want to get a small timer if you don't have one, because that's how you can keep track of how long you're processing things so that you don't go over. Also, you want to make sure you go online and check your altitude, because depending on your altitude, you may have to add more time to your processing time. I'm at only 400 feet above sea level, so I've got the minimum processing time on everything, so I just kind of memorized that. Even though this isn't a canning how-to video, I do want to share a few canning tips with you guys. One of them being, when you're pickling, you want to use 5% acidity vinegar, and you want to use a 1 part water to 1 part vinegar ratio. Once you've got that down, you can add as many spices in there as you like. Also, a tip that I really want to share with you guys is if you're using enamel coated pots like I use, not your pressure cooker, but your normal stock pots, if they're enamel coated, you want to make sure that you do not drain the hot liquid out of those pots after you're done canning. You want that to come to room temperature slowly on its own, because when metal is heated up and cooled down, it expands, and that's how the enamel ends up cracking and you get rusting. So you want to make sure that the water in your enamel pots cool down to room temperature on their own. You don't want to immediately dump them out. That would cause the pot to cool too fast and could cause cracking in your enamel, and that's how I've kept my enamel pots for a really long time. If you guys would like to see some more canning and preserving videos, I do have a playlist that I will link down below. I also will be canning a lot this week and dehydrating, and I've got some kombucha videos and some fermentation videos coming up, so if you'd like to see those, stick around. Thank you guys so much for hanging out today, and don't forget to check the links below to the other homesteads that participated in the collaboration. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you tomorrow.